badasses. Welcome to the Accidental Badass Podcast. It's me, your host, the Accidental Badass herself, Erin Hallstrom. It has been an incredibly long time since we've heard each other, and I guess I'm officially calling this Season 3. I have been on a rather long hiatus because I have been crazy busy this summer. Life and work and everything else have just all hit me at once, and one of the things that I did to take some time, not be so chaotic, was to put the podcast on hold. But I'm back, and I'm excited to be back. For Season 3, I'm going to take the podcast in a slightly different direction, in so much as guests and maybe not having guests. I think I might try a few solo episodes for a while. These will most likely be short episodes, despite being voted having the loudest mouth and being the most talkative in school. I don't always have a lot to say. My friends would probably beg to differ. I almost always have something to say. But I'm going to try this format for a little bit. I miss talking on the Accidental Badass podcast, and I feel like this might become a fun way to get my thoughts out. Speaking of thoughts, one of the biggest ones that I know myself and people that I'm close to have realized is 2020 may have been the year of big things, the realizing, oh my gosh, what could this COVID pandemic do to help me reset, look inward, what have you, become a better person. That may have been last year. Last year, I published a book. I launched this podcast. I did a lot of things last year. And I know from the, small doses of therapy TikTok and therapy Instagram posts that I've consumed in the 2021, especially in the last few months, is how much of that was a response to kind of suppressing feelings and things that I was dealing with. Because man, oh man, has 2021 been a year. 2021 has been tough. It's been hard. Hard in ways that I didn't imagine or think would be possible. Something that I've noticed that I've had a delayed reaction to is grief. My father died in late 2019, and I felt like I spent most of 2020 within the pandemic dealing with and grieving with that death. And come to find out, in 2021, no, I just kept myself pretty busy in 2020. This was the year that a lot of the grief showed up in the strange ways that you constantly hear about when people talk about grieving, and how it hits you on a random Tuesday, looking at something you never thought to associate with the person. And it hasn't just been grieving a dead parent. It's been grieving relationships that I've lost, grieving friends that I've had falling out with, grieving things that happened when I was a kid that I'm realizing now as an adult that I'll never get back the kind of fun, laid-back way of looking at things. Just grieving a lot and trying not to be angry about it. It's something that I'm working on with my therapist. And yes, I talk to a therapist. I have absolutely zero shame in that. Something that I've noticed about myself this year, which is ironic given the name of this podcast and what I wanted to build with it, is I have felt the complete opposite of a badass this year. I found and still find myself thinking and wanting to not be strong anymore. I find my resilience almost exhausting. That's another thing I'm talking to my therapist about. I have almost always been the resilient one, the tough one, the all figured out, the one that has the attitude of life may have knocked you down, but it didn't knock you out. And while I still believe that, I've always been the one that sees the positive, knows that things are going to turn out okay. I have, on an almost daily basis, put on the suit of emotional armor and helped not only myself but friends kind of charge through and bust through things. That's always been me. I've been the resilient one. I feel like that's been my nickname, my title, my label for most of my life. And something I definitely have noticed this year is strength and resilience are exhausting. They really are. Sometimes you want to lay down that sword, you want to take off the armor, and you don't want to be the strong one anymore. You want to be vulnerable, and you want to feel comfortable being vulnerable. I think that's something that I'm trying to do with this podcast this season, and maybe why I've felt this urge to get back on and start talking. I know that I want, and in coming from someplace need, to get in touch with that vulnerability. Now, this won't be like talk radio, and I'm not using this as therapy sessions, but I do want to talk about things and talk about ways that resilience can backfire. Sometimes being that badass and getting in touch with that inner badass, it's a great thing. It's great to know how strong you really are, and it's great to know that you are able to do big, amazing things. When talking to all of the guests in the last year, if they have taught me anything, it is how important it is to feel heard, be heard, and not feel alone. That's what I've absolutely loved about having the guests on this podcast, and I definitely intend to have more guests. But I think this season I'm going to sprinkle in and out the guests, no guests, just me, just talking. So hopefully we'll all enjoy it. Something I hope to gain by doing the podcast this way this season is to create sort of a verbal audio scrapbook to remind myself, but like I've said in the past, to make others feel less alone, of what it feels and sounds like when you don't feel like a badass. I know when I would talk to people, talk to friends, and have them as guests on the podcast, I would hear their stories and I think, wow, you're so amazing what you're doing. That is fantastic. Oh my God, you're such a badass. And so often, the people I would talk to would ponder or wonder, what, who, me? Nah, I'm not a badass. I just did a thing. I'm one of those people who marvels at other people and marvels at their experience or experiences. I think what some people consider their small feats of, oh, hey, yeah, just did this one thing once, is amazing. But probably more often in everyone's life, including my own, there is the natural ebb and flow of feeling like a badass and feeling the complete opposite of that. Feeling miserable or empty or like you're not quite sure what to do next. My hope is with this season and probably future seasons, I intend to have future seasons, my hope is to talk through those feelings of when life doesn't feel like you're on top, when you're at the bottom of the bell curve, when you are at the lowest or feeling like you're getting to the low point. How do you look at yourself, look inward. How do you remind yourself, hey, I am built to do great things, and it's okay to be exhausted? How do you live simultaneously in your body and in your mind to tell yourself it's okay to be tired, it's okay to take a break, it is okay to not be strong every darn day of your life, but at the same time telling yourself, hey, you've got to get back up on that horse. You cannot stay down, to quote Renee Brown. You can't stay down on the floor of that arena and not get back up. Okay, that was a paraphrase of Renee Brown, but she's got this great quote where she talks about people offering unsolicited advice, and that unless they are down on the floor of the arena with you, with the dirt, the tears, the blood-stained agony of what it feels like to be down on the ground, they have no right to tell you how to bounce back. But I feel like that floor of the arena feeling, when you do feel beaten down by life or beaten down by exhaustion, and Lord knows that the majority of people have felt that way more recently, I think it's also important to recognize and realize, how do I get back up? How? Where do I even start? How do I put one foot, one hand in front of the other? How do I even begin? Where do I find that strength? And ironically, maybe that's not the right term in literature or English. I should know this. I was an English minor. But how do you find that? How do you simultaneously remain resilient, but also give yourself grace to not have to be resilient? That, I think, is going to be the focus of season 3, or at least a lot of these episodes where I am talking to myself and those of you who are listening. I hope you'll stick around this season. I hope you will enjoy listening to the thoughts. I have some cool things that have been happening this year, so I'm excited to talk about that. Not every episode will be about that. In fact, the next episode is, I guarantee, will be lots of fun. We may have a guest appearance. We'll see if I can get him to contribute. But thank you so much for listening to this first episode of season 3 of the Accidental Badass podcast. And as always, I appreciate you so much for listening. And if you'd like to learn more about the Accidental Badass podcast, if you'd like to be a guest, if you'd like to tell your story, if you'd just like to be on and talk with me, I would love that. Head to accidentalbadass.com and fill out the form. All right. Thanks, everyone. It was absolutely great. I can't believe I actually got as many minutes into talking as I could. And I can't wait to talk to you next time. Bye.